Alisa first showed up in my life in an Anthropology 101 class, I believe, and immediately I was taken by her maturity and her clear thinking about cross-cultural issues, and her obvious, genuine and sincere concern for people, particularly in Latin America. Through the years, we got to know each other better. She served as a president of SID, Students for International Development, as she worked with the Guatemala Field Study. I believe you went down twice, maybe 3 times. Well, you've been down several times, but officially for BYU, Alisa went down on a field study originally, and then did so well that we asked her to be the facilitator for following group. And so she's been doing great work up in Salt Lake City, and hopefully we'll hear of some of that, and we'll turn the time over to you now.
Yeah, the fancy wireless mic, so hopefully it doesn't make too much noise. I'm really excited today about sharing experiences. So, like Ashley said, I would like to have a lot of discussion and hear some of your ideas as well while we have this discussion. I just want to check really quick on the time. What time do we want to end by?
The bell rings at 10:02.
Okay. I should remember that. It's probably good that I've been gone long enough that I don't remember at what time the bell rings. Like Dave said, I first got involved with the Kennedy Center through an anthropology class that Dave taught, and I had recently returned home from a mission in the Dominican Republic, and as I can imagine, many of you, being at BYU, many of you have served LDS missions or have lived abroad in one way or another, and I was had so many ideas about returning home from a Latin American country, being in the Dominican Republic, seeing the culture, the people, seeing also the range of circumstances that people were living in, and had a lot of ideas that I wanted to download. And so coming to the Kennedy Center felt like a godsend. It was a blessing to be able to be here and have so many people that wanted to discuss and share ideas and talk about the things that were on my mind. And definitely field studies was then again a great opportunity, which Malcolm actually was one of the people who very much encouraged me to go to Guatemala, and I'm glad that Malcolm's here today as well. To be able to, again, return to Latin America and be able to process the ideas that I had as a person coming into a cross-cultural experience. I went on a field study to Guatemala the first year was 2000, and is anyone here familiar with the Guatemala Field Study Program? Have any of you been to the Guatemala Field Study Program? A couple of you? Okay, well, I lived in what was then known as Santa Catarina Ixtahuacan, rather than La Nueva Santa Catarina Ixtahuacan, and there's still questions about what town should be called what in terms of that place. But the village had recently relocated from a valley to the tops of mountains, and why they had relocated varies in reasons, from damage caused during a hurricane to wanting to live closer to the highway to be able to access more economic progress and the such. And it was a very, very interesting experience for me. Definitely one that has influenced my view of the world in insurmountable ways, has changed the way that I look at interactions, and has changed the way that I definitely look at international development. I went to Guatemala with a very idealistic point of view. I went believing that international aid and development was always a positive and beneficial thing for the people who were recipients of that aid, and I came home rather jaded and with a very different perspective. And so what I would like to discuss today is the idea of international development, what the different factors of it are, and how we can, reassure that it has positive effects, and also to discuss who those affect, how how does it necessarily need to be measured that we are positively influencing another community? And I want to start out with the premise that is a very wide and a varied, difficult to measure thing, but I want to discuss some of the different ideas about international development and the benefits to it. To start out, I want to talk for a minute about what some of our motivations are for being involved with international development. So, if we can even broaden the term to, which we're talking about international development, community development, aid. We're going to get afterwards into a discussion where we'll discuss about the different aspects of that. But to start out, I would like to discuss what are your motivations? Does anyone have guilt? Yes, definitely. Okay. So I need to grab just one of these. Okay. I also have to admit that I taught alternative high school for several years, and during that time never learned how to spell in public because it makes me nervous. So I'd give my students extra credit points if they spotted misspelled words and nicely told me to fix them, or just accepted them for what they were. Guilt is definitely a big motivation for being involved in the community in international development. What are other motivations that we have? Yeah? Religious beliefs. Thank you. That's a really important one. When I was a missionary, I served as a welfare missionary, and so definitely my view of the responsibility that as a member of the church I had to be involved in my outside community was something that very much motivated my desire to be involved. That's a good one. What about anyone else? What are your motivations? Dave?
So that people think that we're wonderful.
Yes. So image, yeah. Helpers high. That's a really good one. I like that. Yeah, it feels good. It makes us feel good, and definitely people. It's so nice. It's easier for us to say, "Oh, I've been off in Zimbabwe," or what is the Z factor of countries that have Z's in it? Just sounds really cool to go there. So helping and it makes us feel really important. It's an easy thing to identify with. What are other reasons? Yes.
Sympathy or Mother Teresa syndrome.
Sympathy, yeah. Sympathy, definitely. So seeing someone having a desire and feeling like we can help or do something to change that situation. Yeah, Julie.
Sometimes I think curiosity.
Curiosity, yes, definitely. Okay, curiosity is definitely one that can motivate us. Are there any other motivations that we have? Yeah.
Like to go places, and I feel like I need an excuse.
Okay, so adventure. Yeah, definitely. I think, there's a lot of places. When I hear about all the field studies, I just think, I got to go there. That's got to be the next place I'm going to go. Definitely, that's something that motivates a lot of us. Did you have another one? Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of going along with guilt. Sometimes it's a sense of duty.
Duty. Yeah, that we have an obligation. Especially with the knowledge that you receive, there's a feeling of an obligation that you have to be involved in that sort of way. Are there any others that we want to come up with? Which one of these is the right motivation? There isn't a right motivation. Trick question. But I think that part of what we do is a combination of all of these motivations together, and we can't separate them out. We can't completely say that all of our decisions are altruistic, and every decision that we're making is one where we feel like this is definitely, I'm now doing this for the exact right reason. It may change moment by moment, and for me it has. In many situations it has moment by moment. I'm going to put this aside, but we'll hold on to these. Now I want to talk about what different forms of assistance are offered. When we're thinking about international development, what different types of theories, and I've made a list of some ideas that I had, but if we're thinking about what, and it's not even hard to put a title on it, but if we wanted to think about different forms or ideas of international aid, what are some of those different ideas? And what I'm thinking of when I say that are human rights violations, environmental, women's issues. Tell me what your main idea of what is the most beneficial form of international intervention is. And you don't have to be held to it. You can change your mind in 2 minutes, so that's okay. But yeah, Malcolm?
Appropriate education.
Appropriate education, okay.
Or literacy, or however you want.
Can we just say education? So we can delineate it in a minute. Okay, education is definitely one form of international intervention that is often used. What else? Let me see, yeah.
To build the economies.
Okay, economic, so. Yeah, yes.
Social injustice.
Social injustice. So social intervention, maybe like human rights. Okay, is that okay?
Inequalities.
Yeah. So trying to or correct those. Yes. Environment. Thank you. Hey, we had another one over there. You took it? Oh, that was not fair. That's okay.
Medical.
Medical. Okay, so health, medical. I'm going to grab my list that is not the all-inclusive list, but was the list that I came up with when I was thinking of what all of the different types of intervention there could be. Anything else that anyone can come up with on that? Yeah, Dave?
Just I think economics is split. We have the macroeconomics, those that are trying to deal with the reshaping economies or structural adjustments, as well as the micro ones, which would include things like microcredit, microfinance.
Which we could almost take this whole list and split it macro. Sorry, God. Yeah, because we can definitely, there is economics where we're talking about on a very grassroots level, the Grameen Bank type microcredit models, whereas structural readjustments of the banking institutions and debt in the country. Education as well, if we're talking about formal school systems, or I think Malcolm was maybe referring to more informal or appropriate education that is very specific to the group. Again, human rights as well, changing the laws as opposed to working with small groups of people to ensure human rights even within a home. Environment, again, they can all go both ways. Yeah, Julie?
I was thinking that urban versus rural aid is often a division you can make.
Yeah, so that can even go up here with the same micro, macro. And hopefully you can read the notes. The notes are more for me than for everyone. Anything else that you can come up with? What are the things when you think of the places that you've traveled to, or things that you've seen, even within your own community, when you look at changes that you would like to enact? Yeah, Ashley?
Maybe through religion and culture, you know, kind of perspective and through which to develop.
Cultural and religious. And that's definitely something that we've hit on when I said that, you know, my first exposure to international development was through an LDS mission and believing that the gospel was the way to change and to definitely see. So religious or spiritual development and offering that sort of aid. And those are ways that a lot of different organizations are formed. Anything else? Yeah, Julie?
I'm just thinking of aid that goes to refugees
Okay.
or displaced people.
Can I call that emergency assistance? Is that okay? Okay.
And also I was thinking about, often aid is given along gender lines or like specific to women's groups.
Yeah, so feminist issues. Like, is that okay?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Just one more. It's an S. Yeah, Dave?
Just think of problems with war and conflict and kind of wide-scale violence issues.
And that can be addressed even. I mean, that's military aid even is often suggested as a form of development. Mm. Okay, political.
Imposing democracy.
Yeah. and all of these, and again, we'll is there, I think we got all of the ones that I came up with. One other that I thought of was, if we're referring to women's issues, maybe aid focusing on children, and focusing specifically on that. Anyway, I don't think there was anything else on there that I didn't. Oh, infrastructure as well. Aid offered through. Lonnie and I just got back from going on a trip to Guatemala, and we were commenting on how quickly how much easier it would be to build a bridge across some of the immense valleys instead of going on the side winding roads up and down and seeing landslides along the Pan American Highway, which is the main highway through Central America, and having that be impassable, and thinking of the differences between the United States and here. Can any of you think of success stories that you have seen through any of these types of aid that has been offered?
I just have one more.
Yeah.
Agriculture.
Oh, yes, thank you. That is actually on my list, but I missed it. Agriculture, children's issue. Yep. Yes, okay. Thank you, very important. Can I get any personal stories or like short stories that you can share of things where you've seen a group focusing on one of these issues be very successful or be able to help in some way or another? Alisa, yeah.
Well, there's one that the Esther Foundation was involved in. There's an orphanage in Haiti. A group of businessmen here in Utah saw a need. They went down to Haiti. They saw what was involved, what their version of an orphanage is. And they actually built an entire facility to serve as an orphanage. And then they got BYU students, I believe, to go down and train some of the local people on child care, basic child care, and instituting that. And I think they've now had their first 2 successful full adoptions out of there.
Okay.
But for instance, the idea of changing the child's diaper every time it was dirty or feeding the child 3 times a day was revolutionary to them. And so they have also created a source of income for all people working inside of that work.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. Ashley, did you think of one that I couldn't tell if you were raising your hand or not.
Yeah, I wasn't actually, but I was.
Okay.
I am impressed with the program that's going on in southern India right now, where an organization is working with religious leaders in the community, has met kind of the religious community, and has asked all these leaders to mobilize and help in a cause to educate about HIV/AIDS, which I think is really impressive.
Yeah.
And also is kind of moving into this direction of using multiple or combining approaches in order to do good development work. So that was kind of a project that hit my mind that was interesting to me.
Yeah. Wonderful. Dave?
I was going to say, you see a lot of little successes, but sometimes it's hard to see big areas where we're actually making headway. The one place where I think we could say is with regards to health and medicine. For example, immunizations or oral rehydration has literally saved millions of lives with fairly simple strategies. And so those have been good, and you can't find very many negative side effects from those kinds of programs.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that countries struggle with what do you do when you save so many lives, then there becomes a practical problem
with
how you
population.
quality of life over your extended lifetime.
Yeah.
The population now has increased. So, but anyway, the healthcare areas, I think there's been some real success stories.
Yeah, definitely.
Malaria is
Yeah,
I mean, we still have a problem, but at least
but it's improving.
some definite steps forward.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
I think many of the success stories are the ones that we don't hear about. I think this is where development isn't happening. Where groups like this don't have to go, because places that these kind of things are necessary. Traditional societies have done this fine, like providing health care, protecting the environment, and gender equality. It's what happens when on a larger scale, social and environmental inequalities come into play. These development groups find themselves swimming upstream in this trend of modernization, urbanization, reforestation, agriculturation.
Yeah, and it's difficult. Yeah, definitely, and it's difficult to tell someone who's hungry to not burn down their forest and plant and.
That's an issue because they don't burn the forest down in a way that it can't regenerate on their own. But urban growth and capitalist economies are creating forces that are tipping the balance.
Yes. So definitely like the.
I'm just saying that success stories are ones that we may not hear about because development isn't happening there. And for the record, I think development is a ridiculous term for what we do because sustainable and development are totally contradictory terms.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Development is inherently unsustainable. So I think the success stories are in the groups of people who have been untouched by development.
And what you're referring to is probably the biggest issue. When I went to Guatemala and saw this international intervention, and I felt it was detrimental to the society rather than benefiting them, I just wanted everyone to stop and stop touching them. Don't leave them alone. Don't whatever you do. Just take your it's going to be painful, and I think those keys to questioning and asking ourselves, is this what right do we have to be involved? What right do we have to impose our ideals and our perspectives of what is good and what is beneficial and what is helpful upon another society is so it's very arrogant of us to think that we can make those assumptions on our own. And definitely, when you look at societies that don't have issues with these things, they're the societies that haven't been touched and that don't. And then there are again questions: if they have been touched, then do we have an obligation to go in if we've made mistakes? And again, they're definitely very bad and good. Definitely more bad examples of how these programs have been implemented than there are good. A very easy one, again, for us to examine is religion. If as a church we see missionary work in countries as something very beneficial and helpful to individuals, and yet if you look at the conquistadors and all of the horrible atrocities that have been caused in the name of religion, how do you justify that on both hands and both sides? Julie?
I was thinking of a couple. I forget the woman's name in East Africa and Kenya who did the reforestation.
Julia.
No, not Julia Mavimbela. She won a Nobel Prize for her environmental efforts in Kenya. Yeah. But reforestation, and also I was thinking about South Africa, like a broader scale one. I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a really beneficial intervention in terms of human rights. And so I think for me, a lot of the success stories come from, I don't know, sometimes the language we use is sort of irritating for me, but to try to convey my idea, I guess indigenous people are the ones who come up with the forms of addressing the problems within their own communities. Like this Kenyan woman decides a way to, makes a plan to reforest a lot of the places that have been deforested. The South Africans come up with a way to address the deep divisions and the human rights violations that have happened in their country. So, maybe there isn't a place for us. I don't know. Just kidding.
But there is a possibility, and I'm glad both of you have referred to these things, because what my question is, and if we're looking at all of these theories, and oftentimes, especially as a student here at BYU, I saw a lot of conflict between the different people that were coming from these different schools. There were agriculturalists who were saying, stop worrying about these health problems, because if we just get them the right food, then these things will take care of themselves. There were economists who were saying, you know what, if we just get this economy going, then we're not going to have to worry about building the infrastructure because there will be things that will be able to be put in place. And again, every conflict in every sort of direction. And oftentimes that puts us at a point where we come to a head where we stop. And maybe what we're referring to is that the right answer is that we do stop. I don't know if that is the right answer or not, but it definitely is a question that needs to be asked. At what point is the intervention beneficial or not beneficial? And the discussion in itself is essential that we have that also shows that these examples that were given of stories where things worked, and I'm sure someone coming from another perspective could say, but this didn't work in this situation. Or, you may have thought that looked really great. Especially in Guatemala, there was a program that was in this village in Guatemala that was put together by Doctors Without Borders. There was this water tank that was supposed to give the community water, and Doctors Without Borders had received a Nobel Peace Prize that year. And they had a big thing up on their website about this water that they were bringing to Santa Catarina, Ixtahuacan. The only thing was it didn't work. There was no water, and no one was receiving water. And yet, does that mean we say, don't build water pumps, which could be one of those really easy things to say, oh, that's always a good thing. It's always a good thing to build a water pump. But the question was, should you build it in this part of the village or in this part of the village? And how does that change, and how does that affect the activities that you're putting together? What are some of the consequences that we can see? And I think these have been inferred upon, but as a group, I'd like us to discuss that. What are some of the consequences that we see that groups face or communities face as a result of international intervention? And maybe that's a better word than international, or sustainable development. It's intervention, and that maybe is too politically charged, but yeah, yes. And it's a lot more honest than assuming that I'm going to make your life better because of what I have. It's just saying, I'm going to come in and interfere with what you're doing, and you can take it or leave it. So what are some of the consequences? Malcolm, you had?
Dependency.
Dependency, yes. And I'm going to grab a list that I made as well. So, okay, dependency. Do you have an example
When I went to do ethnographic work in Ixtahuacan, I worked with a bilingual school, and there were funds from GTZ from Germany.
Yeah, the German equivalent to USAID.
Exactly. Yeah, and they were helping the whole bilingual Quiche Spanish education projects throughout Guatemala, and the funding ended. And so the school, I don't know if they didn't plan to help these schools be sustainable on their own, and they're really suffering right now. And they haven't considered. Also, they've produced a lot of teachers, bilingual teachers, and there are not enough positions, and so they haven't looked at all those things. So
yeah, dependency is a definite consequence. Yeah. Wait, hold on. Wait till the microphone gets to you. I was slacking on that early on. Sorry.
I think dependency, like economics, goes from like a very micro level, like to individual schools, all the way up to governments. And I think Guatemala is a really good example of how, because of all this international aid, the government hasn't stepped up in all the ways that it could to provide for its own citizens. Yeah,
definitely. So again, that dependency can range and can be very broad. Definitely.
I think the dependency, aside from receiving aid from international organizations, now I see this in Guatemala. Now that a lot of this international aid has stopped, the dependency continues by having a lot of immigrants coming to the U.S. And so they have to find other ways of feeding their family or providing education for their children. And so that instead of being sustainable in the country, they're still depending on outside sources.
Which definitely, Ixtahuacan is a very good example of that, where they had received a significant amount of aid, and now, as soon as that has slowed down, high numbers of the population are immigrating. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, Julie.
I think, this may be too esoteric, but I think one sort of profound consequence of the way we choose to interfere can be like the damaged fabric of human relationships, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like not only are the way we introduce concepts of self to other people by the way we interact with them, but even our own notions of ourself or our own identity. I'm thinking of kind of two weird examples. One girl that I met this summer in Ghana was talking about how, no, your skin is so beautiful, you're white, you're so beautiful, this black skin is so ugly. I feel like notions of self can become really damaged when, whether it's race or class or whatever it is, or ethnicity or language, and that person is perceived as being higher, or some kind of a hierarchy created in how you intervene or interfere with someone, that I think can be long-term damaging, not only to the people who are oppressed, but also the oppressors, or the helped versus the helpers, So I think that's one thing I think a lot about, too.
That is a really good example of, especially someone coming in offering intervention as seeing themselves as a superior,
Right.
So changing social. What do you call it? Social damage.
Well,
Yeah.
dignity, I think, is one thing you're talking
About there,
Dignity.
personal dignity is damaged, but also then, these relationships. There's something about when you create a dependency, you do create a superior and inferior, and then that relationship will never be the same. And I've seen this in my own life, where I had an equal relationship with someone, and we were considered friends and equals, and things were going on quite nicely. And then somehow, through something, I can think of several examples, but because of thinking that I was doing the right thing, stepping up sort of to help them in a way that actually damaged the relationship, because all of a sudden I was the giver and they were the receiver, and it was quite clear that I had a lot more to give than what they had to give. And then I forever regretted that, and I'm a lot more careful now because of that. But
Which is interesting how subtle that can be, even within our own society here, that can happen. It doesn't need to be one person coming from a different society stepping in. That loss of dignity and that loss of equality in a relationship can quickly be damaged. What are some of the other consequences? Victor? Yeah.
Well, I just think, with development, I always look at development differently. In the places that I've worked overseas, because it seems like I always feel there's an imposition, because it does disrupt the norm when it's almost like imperialism. Again, I don't want to use a pretty harsh word for development, of a dependency, but at the same time you are imposing your way of looking at life. But at the end of the day, we still need the outside help as an insider. So there needs to be a balance between how we bring the resources from the outside, but at the same time develop a framework that is embedded in the context that you are bringing these resources to, and then help them negotiate how they use these resources. Where of course, it's dependency is a theory that will always. As long as in economics, world economics, will always have this factor on. But at the same time, to have the people in the context and be empowered by it, we need to have them, solve their problems. We need to have both, the inside and the outside, a balance between the both of these, so there is a positive, hopefully, empowerment for these people.
Which I think is very. I like that you said that this doesn't mean we're going to stop. It doesn't mean that it erases our obligations and those primary reasons that we listed as for our motivations for wanting to be involved. Those are not taken away. And even if we cleared the list of the reasons that are more selfish and only left reasons that still felt justifiable, we're all here. You're in this room because you're someone who is interested in being part of a community and part of a society. And for whatever reason, whether it be obligation or whether it be a spiritual motivation or whether it be a sense of guilt or a sense of responsibility, we feel that as a society, whether or not it's an interconnectedness or whatever that's coming from. And that is something that's really important. I think that for us as a group to recognize that this is our desire, and now let's look at it and say, are we accomplishing what we desired? Are we seeing what we want? And an interesting effect of field studies in particular is that there is a great possibility that those who come home from field studies have possibly not influenced a beneficial change upon the community. It may have been a zero or a negative change. It may be zero, no contact, no change, which is unlikely, but it may have been slightly positive. But the biggest change that is going to take place is within yourself as an individual. And as that change takes place, it changes the way that you interact with society, and it changes the way that you interact with the world. And those are the changes that can be more lasting. And if it makes you more human and more charitable, then these are the changes that really have a lasting effect. Yeah, Victor.
And it just goes along with I don't know the exact quote, but what Gandhi said I think Bosso would know this, to see the change in the world, we have to be the change in the world.
Yeah, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Yeah,
right?
So it comes down to that individual change that you make that people see, from the
definitely.
inside out.
Thank you very much. I want to make some really quick, just going over some of the other consequences that I thought of, and feel free to throw in more than if I'm not coming on to, but increased corruption. Yeah. Yes. Oh, thank you. Please.
I just had one comment I just wanted to add. It seemed like we've been talking a lot about like dignity that's been lost, and we've got like an inferior and a superior, two groups of people that are. It seems like one's getting and one's receiving. They're giving, one's receiving. So, I think one of the problems with it is that the person that's receiving doesn't have a chance to kind of give back to what they're giving through. So, I guess it's a negative consequence, but one of the solutions would be if there were a way to find out you can give them this type of you can help them set up this type of community, and then they can give back to you. They can impose some of their tradition on you, and kind of it's a social interaction instead of like, I'm going to give you this, you're going to receive it. Kind of, this is the system.
Have you experienced that before? You
sounded
like you did when you were explaining it.
It's kind of just the way the system's set up. It seems like we're imposing something and then we don't want something back. But I think it'd work. They'd feel a lot better about receiving something if they knew that they were kind of contributing to it.
Yes, definitely. And I've felt that personally, definitely. And so we're going to come up here and then go back down there.
I don't know. I kind of think this is sort of like where that idea of cultural relativism comes in, because I've been a field studies student a couple times, and like I think a lot of times we go to these developing countries thinking we're bringing economic prosperity, money, material stuff that's going to help them. But the thing is, like when I was down there, like I received so much more from the preschool that I volunteered with, just from the relationship and love and compassion that they showed me as a volunteer. I couldn't believe like that they would feed me lunch, even when they were trying to feed their kids lunch, and I was like, how can you do this? How can you afford this? And it came back to like they were giving back something to me that was non-monetary in value, a relationship. And I think that, you know, human beings are really complex, you know, and so we all have something to give. Some people are born into areas where they have a lot of material possessions. Maybe that's what they can give. Other people's have really big hearts, you know, and in a sense that is often more important than the material possessions that we have, or the relationships that we build. And so, I don't know, I think, you know, especially we're sitting in a Western country, a developed country, the richest country in the world. I think that, you know, we need to think about that in terms when we talk about international development, that it's not just a one-way flow, but there are people all over the world that have things to give back to us. You know, we're lacking a lot because of the society that we grow up in. There's things that we lack that we can't see, and there are people in other parts of the world that can give us that perspective, and I think that give and take sort of perspective is important. So
that is, thank you so much for saying that. I've kind of pulled off this negative consequences sheet, and it seems like we're coming to some solutions here, so I want to make sure that I'm not noting these down. But this solution, what was your name? Dave. What Dave was saying, if we call it reciprocal, and both of you, what was your name? Blaine. Dave and Blaine. Reciprocal development. I don't know if we could call it that, but that's not even spelled very close to right. Okay. I don't want to. And then I want to hold on to those. Okay, so we'll hold on to these. Some of the other problems that we can come across that are also negative things that can happen are also. So we talked about increased corruption in an area, and I'm sure that everyone has seen that. They've seen where, and then of course Santa Catarina is the one that's most prominent on my mind, in an area where there are new homes being built, and I was let in on this community, this woman in the community telling me, you know what, everyone looks like they're sharing, but so-and-so is getting 2 houses built for them, and so-and-so isn't getting anything built for them. And in a community where typically sharing and community partnership was prevalent, when the intervention came in, the corruption was very much increased. Adverse political effects. We can all think of examples of politicians in countries who came in with very good intentions, and then when having that power and the aid and money that was coming in negatively were affected, and definitely trying to impose democracy or other examples that we've come up with.
Just like assassinate people.
Yeah, if they're not doing what you want them to do, just get rid of them. Yeah, Dave?
I think a lot of our
sense of well-being comes from the fact that we belong, we have an identity, that we belong to family, to community, to a culture, to a nation. And all of those identities can be threatened or even destroyed through certain types of development efforts that are meant to do good, but what they end up doing is fragmenting the society and making people lose traditions or lose a sense of community. Like you said, I mean, if somebody's getting 2 houses and someone's getting no houses, people that used to like each other all of a sudden really don't like each other, and so there's this breakdown of a sense of identity and community.
Definitely, and that's again coming in. It's been referred to as this materialism coming in and feeling like if those possessions weren't an option, then the fighting wouldn't be there, and maybe or communities where there isn't a need to fight or there isn't competition for scarce resources, then you're not going to have that type of situation going on. Some other ones that I came up with were creating, and this is again ethnic tensions that can come about, or sometimes aid is often given to young countries where divisions aren't set up and there aren't organizations set up to disperse the aid in a way that is beneficial to the society, and we can see that a lot in Iraq right now, where the ethnic tensions in the community are stopping from getting any sort of benefit out of what is trying to be shared. Wiping out of local production, losing local, by oftentimes countries will call aid, if there's an overproduction of something in a certain country, we send it over to another country and call that aid, where in reality it's just our surplus, but then it then wipes out local production. Also, loans that sometimes loans that were considered irretrievable, such as loans to countries where a dictator has been ousted or assassinated. Countries will sometimes say, well, we're going to forgive you of that debt, where there's really no direct benefit to the country in doing that. The money has been gone and it wasn't coming back, and you're not benefiting the country. We don't have a whole lot of time left. We've got maybe 30 seconds, but I think definitely my biggest question, and there isn't a specific answer to this, and we're all trying to find out the answer to this, but do we continue being involved? And I think we've touched on this, when there can be negative consequences. And something that I think is very essential to understand is that the dialogue is one of the keys to understanding and promoting healthy development. Too often we see these groups of people that are coming from the different sides of development and saying that their side is right and their side is the only way, and squelching at that same time people who are coming from different perspectives to try and stop them from doing the development that is not necessarily what they deem as the ideal development. But that as we are able to converse without accusing, without trying to strengthen our own pride, that we can better facilitate and better be able to help those around us and be fellow citizens. And hopefully, we don't call it, sustainable development, or we don't call it whatever the wording is, that you can hopefully look past the wording, or look past what the generalizations are that have been made, and try and find the root and look for the benefits and work together to try and find lasting solutions and lasting partnerships. So are there any, I know that's a lot to say at the end, and there are so many ideas that came up, but I really appreciate all of your thoughts. Dave?
So, Lisa, with your experiences, then, are you, with what you're saying here, are you promoting a more holistic approach, saying that we shouldn't get discouraged and sort of quit doing these kinds of things, but rather it takes all of us working together? And
definitely, and I think it's difficult, because when I was at BYU, the word World Bank or IMF were bad words, that it was kind of a swear word to refer to those things, and yet if we are able to hold off judgment on anyone other than ourselves, and look at the different things that are being done, and try and have a more holistic perspective, I think we have a lot more chances of success and a lot more chances of being the effect that we hope to achieve. All right. Thank you.